AMG releases a databank download for the first Rogue One box. The team assembles!
Hello everyone and welcome back to another Rapid Reactions video with Lee. AMG was very rude and dropped a whole lot of info the day before I went on vacation, so we're not coming quite as quickly, but that just means we've had time to really let our takes... I was going to say fester, but that doesn't sound good. That sounds like they're... Marinate, yeah, exactly.
There you go.
So let's dive right into it, Mr. Lee. How about we? Because I think we're both very excited about Cassian, and we both love Rogue One and Andor. Mm-hmm. Season 2 coming soon onto Disney Plus near you.
This is
not a sponsor,
yeah.
Unfortunately. Oh, if we were sponsored by Disney Plus, that would be great. Cassian, much like Krennic, which we'll get to when we see his full box, Cassian is bringing 9 squad points and only 2 force to the Rebels. So that's something nice for the era. That's kind of new. You could, there's pretty decent 5s in the era, and we'll see one very soon. His character card, he moves people, he gets some extra dice. This town is ready to blow, I think, is notable for one big reason, which is it's a new trigger, which is kind of fun.
I mean, just trying to theory craft how much of an impact that could have on the board, where you've had a whole bunch of units sort of dive into a point, maybe you lose it, and then being able to put a potential 3 damage out. It's probably not 3, but I think as an opponent you have to be really wary of pushing too hard to take a point and then just having that blow up in your face, quite literally.
The thing is, it's every point. It's not even just 1 point. It's anyone contesting anything, which is pretty great, and I think it averages just under 2 damage. So that's significant. Even if it's just 2 damage on Dark Troopers, it takes something from, one-shot range, or not one-shot range, into much more easy for, say, a Kanan to come in, do 7 damage down to 6, and wound them. So I think this is a really cool trigger. Excited to see how it plays. But the big thing for Cassian is make 10 men feel like 100.
Yes.
I think the wording here could be a little vague, so maybe a candidate for the rules for him when he actually releases. But I believe it's a character other than Cassian is going to get that advance, as opposed to other than the wounded unit. Also, you can trigger this with a strain, but basically it's just choose anyone, and they kind of are like Mando. If Rebel spies, of which there are many, full reposition, pretty great. Actually, it doesn't even have to be Rebel spies, just any spies. That's really good.
It turns out
think?
Cassian's yoked. I do like you calling out that it is just when someone becomes wounded. It's not even because an enemy does it, which also means that there's a saucy world where Hera gets involved.
Oh, I didn't even. No, because they go straight to injured. They go.
Oh,
straight
you're
to
right.
Injured,
They
sadly.
skip the whole wounded step. Well, there goes. There goes that idea.
There is a spicy world where he does terrible things, wounds his own, does 2 damage to his own friend, wounds them, and still gets a reposition out of that, which is going to be really, really nice. And then also we've got extra impact and sharpshooter for rebels with the Shatterpoint card, and we'll see some nice combos for that. Hint, hint. Leia and Rebel Commandos both have good ways to get focuses.
Absolutely.
So I think really strong revenge trigger, and it's going to get even stronger in a moment. If we look at the stances, his first one, let's do Light It Up first, because I think it's the worst stance.
I agree.
It's got a lot of damage up front. It has range 5. He's got that Mando thing going on of range 5 on one stance, range 4 on the other. It does 6 damage easily, but then it really falls off.
It is a very weird tree in that you get all of your damage up front, and then what I think a lot of people generally take for granted with shoves and conditions much further down the tree. But I definitely think there's a world for it where you're hey, I really just need to push a little bit of damage. I kind of see this being the stance that he starts in, and then maybe you start the game with a cheeky 8 dice at something, and then you're okay, cool. Let's swap to a different stance.
I'd go the other way, because I think this is actually a better defensive stance because of the crit mitigation. So I would probably start in the other stance, and then if I need to shoot in this, I flip to it, and either way, I'm going to end the turn in that stance.
A little bit of crit mitigation is nice, but I do like all the ways defense expertise as well. I will go on record saying that I was someone that wasn't a huge fan of defense expertise trees where you just get a heal out of it. So that would be someone like Wrecker in Boom Stance, because I was like, surely a block is better. But I think after a little bit of experience, being able to just randomly, well, not randomly, being able to heal off a condition that you're stuck with is super potent.
It's very good.
Yeah.
I mean, critically, Wrecker only gives a heal. He doesn't give
Yes.
a block until
true.
3. Versus if you're rolling even just 2 expertise with Cassian, you're still getting 2 blocks out of it. It's very Hera-like, I would say. And yeah, it's really nice at combating conditions, especially. They hit you with a strain. You know, they coordinated fire a pin onto you or something and then shoot you. You can just heal that off most times. You know, it's only 5 dice. I wouldn't call him a tanky character at all,
No.
but he does have 10 health, which is better than a lot of heroes, so he's fine, honestly. And here we
Yeah.
get the potential for double shoves. He's got, in both
Love.
stances, he's got that hit to crit thing going on. As we've seen kind of with Shakti, it's great at bringing up the floor of an attack, not great at raising the ceiling, so I'm not expecting him to get like super far down the tree, but 2 or 3 crits reliably, I'll take it.
This feels very much like the down and dirty in the melee sort of stance compared to his lighted up stance. Like, that's actually a fairly decent melee tree as well.
I was going to say, in some cases, it might even be better in melee if you just need
100%.
like results and
Yeah.
you roll that 1 expertise. It's good. I think this is definitely where you want to be attacking, and then maybe it's debatable which side you want to be defending. It kind of depends on what you're going up against.
Yeah, absolutely.
But let's move on to Cassian's best friend, K2SO. Coming in at 5 points. That's expensive. He does some stuff, whatever. You know, he has a way to move. He has a revenge trigger, which is very great. And critically, if someone gets wounded and they're Rebel Alliance, Cassian doesn't care, but K2 cares. You could use that Cassian reposition to get K2 into range 4 for congratulations, you're being rescued. So then he triggers. So that's very strong. If you actually wound K2, that's kind of bad news for you. He's got some very strong in the moment and future abilities when it comes to either conditioning up his wounder, dashing a friend, or removing momentum in order to get like pure struggle. Like that can be really handy in late rounds, maybe especially during something like Mission Critical. If you've been playing on their side the whole time, you might max out momentum even, and you can pull it onto your side, or you can pull it from their side. There's so many things you can do with that.
Absolutely.
Wounding K2, not great, but the best thing, Lee, and I think what has us both excited, Lockdown. We've seen it on Lobot.
Who doesn't love lockdown?
But Lockdown, where you can reactively move him into position with that reposition, because he is a spy, so a reposition from Cassian. Oh, baby. Oh, baby.
I really feel like that is such a lovely bit of synergy between these two. I mean, obviously, I think K2 is good enough that he kind of stands by himself. 5 points does make him fairly prohibitive with pairing him with other rebels at the moment. Who knows what the future might hold. But I really like how they've got K2's lockdown paired with Cassian's reposition shenanigans for someone else. So good.
Well, it's really good. He does like to use force. You know, both of these big abilities are consuming 1 force even before he gets wounded. Again, maybe you're not trying to wound him as the opponent, so they kind of don't get more expensive. But yeah, force will be an issue in Cassian lists because he's only bringing 2.
Yeah, that's kind of a novel thing, right? We haven't seen too many, like, 2 force characters where they have either no way of regenning force a la CAD, or they have no way of discounting force usage a la the Armorer. Yeah, so Cassian's interesting.
Hondo has a way to regen force. Thrawn has ways to kind of discount stuff because of how he reserves. So yeah, that's a very good point. But I look at Cassian and I think I'm always going to take K2 with Cassian. And I look at K2 and I'm like, if I'm bringing K2, I want to have him with Cassian so that lockdown is really doing work.
100%.
And his stance, it's good. It's fine.
Love me a shove on 1.
Yeah,
easy
no
crit.
damage. Doesn't feel great. But hey, if you're taking that spot, it's because you need the shove, so you don't necessarily care about the damage. His defense, not great, but he has some crit mitigation. Good in melee, good at range. Yeah, he's he's fine.
Yeah. I like thinking that for the 5 dice revenge, like, more often than not, I don't particularly care if I'm getting, like, 3 or 4 damage through on that 5 dice. It's nice when it happens, but what I really need to happen on a revenge attack is generally a shove. So,
Yep. He can easily get 1 or 2 crits on that that revenge attack, get 1 or 2 shoves, and that's what you're looking for, 100%. And then Pathfinders, 4 cost. I'm so happy. I was so happy to see another 4 cost rebel support because it's just they don't have good supports with 2 bodies. Unfortunately, I kind of think they still don't. The unit card for Pathfinders is great. Defensive maneuver, camouflage. Sure, they get hunkers. Not as good as clone hunkers because there's no Obi-Wan. Cloak and dagger feels like an ability that should be free, personally, just because it's like, okay, do 1 big attack instead of 2 smaller attacks.
I'm not a big fan of like, I think one of the best things about a 2-bodied support is not necessarily that you have 2 bodies, although that is obviously huge in Shatterpoint. It's also that you just get 2 bites at the apple when it comes to making that ever so important, like, shove, or that ever so important, like, I really need to wound someone, and trading from 2 down to 1 never feels good, in my opinion.
Yeah. I mean, there are advantages, like 1 9-dice attack. Let's look at their, when we look at their tree, the shove's on 3, so it kind of gives you a better chance to get 3 down because they only roll defense dice once, so it's kind of better to have 1 big attack. But just odds-wise, I'd have to run the numbers as far as which is better. 2 small, it depends on circumstances, but probably 1 bigger is better. But it costs a force, and I don't think in a force-typed squad, that's what I'm going to spend it on. So that's all to say, I'll probably still run commandos over Pathfinders pretty much every time, even with Cassian. But so these guys are competing for spot number 2. They do have immunity to pin and scale. They have a cute little advance when they have a hunker instead of dash, which could show up. It's kind of cute with charming Leia because she has lots of ways to dash people. They start with a hunker, so she could advance them both. It's cute. We could see
There's
that.
some things, yeah.
If we look at their stance card, they've got 2 blocks on 2, which gives them a lot of durability compared to a lot of other people they might be competing with in this slot. 4 ranged defense dice. You're hoping to augment that with hunkers, but again, there's no Obi-Wan, so that's harder. And that tree, that's the problem. It's all the tree.
Yeah, like when I think about the 501st and how they're kind of maligned for. I know, right? We're dropping opinions here today. Like,
it's bad whenever 501st shows up.
Yeah, when the 501st of the comparison. Yeah. And I think there are a lot of reasons not to love the 501st, but I feel like one of the biggest things for me personally is don't get a shove till 3, and when I do, there's nothing else with it. And hey, check it out. We have Pathfinders that do the same thing for 0.1. Obviously, there's a lot of differences. I think, to your point, they do seem fairly tanky. They've got 8 health. They've actually got in my opinion, a really good defensive expertise tree.
I love the expertise tree. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. But yeah, as far as are these guys going to have a good activation?
But they're 2 bodies, so if it's do I take these guys or Chopper? Yeah. I mean, in non-Kanan lists, okay, yeah. I'll probably take these guys just for 2 bodies. But yeah, they don't shove well, and they don't do damage very well either. For those who have read my article on just crit icon density, these guys score pretty poorly. But if they're alive, if you can keep them alive, immunity to pin and scale is quite handy.
Yep, absolutely.
So let's transition into lists then. And Lee, do you want to go first?
Yeah. So I think one of the first lists that admittedly jumped out to the both of us when we were first seeing the Cassian box was to pair them up with Death Star Leia and just run her box and his box together. I think one of the things that appeals to me is that it's fairly simple and straightforward to play it out of the box. You don't need to buy a bunch of different boxes to get a very competent list put together. I do think that if you have Rebel Commandos, they're probably a better choice than Pathfinders, but in the spirit of I just want to spend as little money as possible to get a really good list on the table, Cassian box, Death Star Leia box, I think pairs very well together. Obviously, a ton of spy synergy. Do have to watch out with Han and Chewie not being rebels for the case of KTSO. But aside from that, I think the rest of it hums together really well.
I do like that Han and Chewie bring Force Refresh. if they can get a wound on their attacks, which really helps the list. As you say, the not being rebels is kind of important for Cassian, but other than that, not too bad. You get movement from Luke, which I really like, because K2SO is a secondary who's not bringing that movement. And Leia gives just more synergy. Like, if you don't want to use your reposition on K2SO, reposition Leia. She could be in deployment. Someone on the midline gets wounded. She gets a reposition, then she can do her dash, attack, boom, the midline is safe. Very strong there.
I was just going to add that I really do like you never even have to do it, but I think being able to threaten, hey, if you wound anyone, I get to reposition Leia, which probably means I get to put her anywhere I need on the board. And then I'll trip her revenge after that, I think is a really powerful pairing. Even if you never do it.
Yeah, it's great to threaten. And I'm actually going to pull an audible here. I was going to talk about a Cassian Han list, but I'm actually just going to say, screw it. Let's just throw Cassian with Kanan. This also gives me a spot to give my hot take for Cassian, which is maybe not that hot, but I think the Cassian K2 combo is the new king of revenge. I think it's better than Kanan when it comes to revenge. Kanan has other pros and stuff, so I'm not saying that it's necessarily going to make better lists. But when you think about, hey, what sort of revenge stuff do I need to worry about in the meta, I think Cassian K2 is rising straight to the top because of the flexibility, because of lockdown and all of that.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. I think that it offers so much more flexibility. And at the end of the day, Shatterpoint is a game about seizing objectives. And while it's really fun to drop a 5 dice and potentially wound someone on your opponent's turn, I think that just being able to say, nah, you don't get this point is so much more potent.
Kanan can also just only be in one spot, and Cassian can affect the whole board. So he can be very flexible. But that being said, why not both? So just for the sake of some lulls, why not put, we're going to keep Cassian in K2, obviously. And then just let's fill things up with Spectres.
Yeah.
Get the whole Kanan box, throw Chopper in there. Just, hey, is it going to be great? Maybe we should put some commandos in. But now all of a sudden, no one wants to get wounded. Like, the revenge is super strong here. You've got Ezra. That's another great target for Cassian. If you can move a tiebreaker body, that's another great threat. You can toss Rebel Commandos in here if you want. I think one of Cassian's big things is he's not necessarily a playmaker. Like, his activation is kind of fine, but he's not like a Wowia kind of guy on his own turn. Leia can be a bit more of that for sure, but I think someone like Kanan or Han are really great playmakers. So pairing him up with like a real playmaker primary could help there. And Kanan, he's got force push, but he doesn't often have to use it, which means he can be a bit force neutral on his turn, which really helps when it comes to force management.
I was going to say, are we going to talk about Kanan also being a source of force regen? And then I think...
No. We're not using that sense. We're not using that sense.
Technically, yes, but I don't think I've ever taken advantage of that.
But and again, if we want the best of all the worlds, you know what? Let's maybe advance Kanan, and then he can do his jump and attack.
True.
Pretty great.
That is true. It does open up a different door, because I find that usually you don't want to run in Soresu because you're worried that, sure, I get a jump, I get my heals, and I get my attack because you came after a Spectre, but I can't melee anyone. Cassian solves that.
Yes, I do think the one of the weaknesses here, and when you get Ezra in that other secondary slot, it's tough to find movement in the list, so you do probably want to stay in pack leader for that extra movement, but
Agreed.
you never know. In a pinch, it could be handy. Yeah, that's what I'm gonna go. I think we've got a tournament coming up in April, which we've talked about before, the West Coast Open, which you are running.
Yes, buy your tickets.
I am very much hoping that Cassian is not delayed from that start of April release, because I want to get my hands on Cassian and run him in K2 in some form or fashion. Probably more like that first list, but maybe more like the second list. We'll have to see what testing brings. I'm really excited for this box. It's clear to me that revenge is like a rebel identity, and I like it. It feels kind of tricksy. This box feels very tricksy to me,
Absolutely.
so I'm looking forward to it.
Yep. Can't wait.
Perfect. Well, that's us. And keep an eye out for, we also got another drop, the Ahsoka Vader Dual Pack. So we'll be doing our rapid reactions for that shortly. Keep an eye out, everybody. Have a good one.
Take it easy.